privilege to welcome you to the user group tonight. So my name is Sarah Bassett. I'm part of the leadership team here at AWS based in Perth, and it's just so awesome to see this room full and many of you kitted out in AWS reInvent recap here. I'd like to first start by acknowledging the Wajda people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. And I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander individuals here today. I'm only going to take just a few minutes to welcome you again for coming along, and also hopefully get you primed and excited for what is going to be an action-packed, content-full next hour or so with some awesome lineup of speakers. There was about 120 announcements at this year's reInvent. That pushes us well over 200 services, about 50 to maybe even 60,000 people in attendance at reInvent this year, and we are going to pack it all in at super speed to the next little while and give you that recap. For those of you that watch your YouTube or Reels on 1.5 to 2x speed anyway, you're going to be like right at home. I'm just a little worried about when we hand it over to Red Looney, because then we're talking like haters. There really won't be much time for questions, so we're just going to have to kind of keep shuttling the content through, because really the intent is to give you all that content and then have an opportunity to follow up, ask questions around the community after. And so before I hand it over to the first speaker, which is Ash, I also just want to give a quick shout out to all of you for coming and to staying part of the user group community, but also to our partners, our awesome partners that support this. Usually we're in Flux, which is a generous sponsorship that we get from Journey One team, and I know a lot of our other partners are really leaning in and helping to make this community thrive. So that's pretty special to us here working in Perth, so just a big shout out to all the partners as well. So without any further ado, let me hand it over to the first speaker. Enjoy.
Yeah. My first action as speaker. Okay, so I'm Ash. I'm actually signed to our public sector business, so helping government and as well. We really love this time of year because we get to compare the counts of new services to the counts of grey hairs appearing on my face every year. So without further ado, let's talk about business applications. Cool. What are they? So you're consistently going to start to see AWS bring out industry and vertical SaaS-like solutions. So we're going to move up the stack, get out of that kind of pad salad style of getting our customers to build. So let's have a chat about what some of those are. What is AWS Quicker? It is collaboration software. Everyone uses something like this every single day. So video conferencing, voice, messaging, file sharing, enterprise hooks. Where it raises the bar is security. So I'm talking things like forced expiry of content. We only hold data on our servers for as long as it takes to deliver messages, and has continuously rotating private keys on the client side as well. So it's actually quite difficult to man and build this kind of technology. Has especially useful, utilization for extra sensitive customers, especially auditability as well, which we've improved and provide those attestations. So applications of military and sensitive diplomatic communications, for example, who uses this. A bit of a hint as well, I'm going to use Brett's magical thing. Oh, the bottom, your left hand, is the GA. So what does that mean? That means generally available. Look out for that on every single slide. We might provide some other hints like in preview, or if it's in Sydney, we'll call that out as well. So look for that through the presentation too. Okay, clean rooms. Imagine a world where you can invite multiple AWS accounts, not just your own, but third parties to collaborate and contribute data sets in a secure environment. No data gets copied, because the magical things retire. Share sensitive data with people we're collaborating with. And we can query that into place without copying and moving it. Some super strong security controls are part of this as well. So things like limiting exactly what SQL statements can be executed, and also providing cryptography against particular columns which you nominate. So why is that important? Well, here's a use case. For example, you might want to protect personally identifiable information information when you're contributing your data set to a collaboration in clean rooms. You can specify, all right, I want clean rooms to encrypt name, address, gender. You keep postcode, that's okay. I'm fine for people to work out people's behavior by postcode. But I also want an analysis rule that doesn't let anyone do joins based on first name, surname, addresses, and things like that too. So you get some very strong controls for getting cryptographic encryption. Those data sets, particularly if you encrypt them, it'll obviously return unreadable information to people. If you try and execute a query that is set up as an analysis rule, it's valid query entirely. So very useful. We have high skilled environments, data sharing, multiple collaborators. That's pretty consistent as well. Alright, omics. I first have to give you a legal disclaimer. It sounds medicinal. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. That is quite literally a copy and paste from our documentation online as well. So what it actually is an AWS service for speeding up scientific discovery of data. And it's all wrapped around industry terminology and economics verticals. So a place to store genome data, a place to store the metadata describing that. They refer to it as reference mapping. Has some analytics transformation capabilities, again specific to genomics, and workflows. So gives researchers an ability to define an end-to-end process, how much computing power to throw at it, industry-specific tool they need to run processing, and parameters and things like that, running image processing at scale. Now, since it is an S3, I will call out it's actually a really good opportunity for researchers to collaborate with potentially data scientists. Imagine pointing something like SageMaker or Autopilot is to go and automatically work out what's really good at this data and start to get some awesome health outcomes from it. Really cool. Alright, SimSpace Weaver is not enterprise Minecraft. What it is, it's a managed service for 3D simulation. Under the covers, it's actually a fleet of graphics instances in EC2. They get divided up into spatial partitions. So kind of like a big map, imagine you draw a grid on it. Server is assigned to one of those cells. What SimSpace will do though is replicate the data across all of those spatial partitions. As you're cruising and surfing through those visualizations and observing, the assets follow you. So imagine you're modelling rising sea levels in Western Australia. As you move from the southwest to the northwest, the floodwater is going to chase you out of that. Very scary. But super helpful for digital twin and advanced geospatial. Okay, supply chain. What can we do with this? So this is about connecting AWS to things like your ERP, supply chain software, and demand-related data from those systems of record, and unify them into what we call a pre-canned transformation data model review. It uses natural language understanding across those systems of record to work out what's related, what's not. Once it's formed that view for you, it will start to do a real-time visualization of the health of inventory levels in each location, and do some discovery on maybe some risks that might come out of that related to demand. Also come up with recommended actions and a way to push that information out various components of those systems of record is responsible for that operational stuff. Okay. As everyone going with the pace, it's probably going to be like this the rest of the time. Resiliency, very topical right now, especially because the Melbourne region is now open to customers, as is the Perth local zone, so there might be some interesting things you can now do within Australia. Blue-green, so it's a delicious application release strategy. Everyone should be doing this to get very safely into production with some fallback options, of course. We're bringing that to RDS. It is just the MySQL variations of RDS, or also MariaDB support anyway. But as it pertains to database upgrades, instance changes, if you need more or less resources, yes. Version upgrades, and also you can make some changes to the schema as well in the green environment. And that's run up too. What RDS will do is create a complete copy of the environment. For those familiar with the AWS console, you can see there green tags. And we'll keep that in sync. Now, when it's time for a switch over, it's about a minute of downtime, so that's really important. So edges can be closed, data can be made consistent, and then swap over for. Fantastic. Disaster recovery. What is this? So it's used to replicate virtual machines from on-premises or within AWS cloud. Can be between zones, can be between regions. So it's useful for an IaaS-style DR and migration. So that can be really useful where maybe an application, maybe off the shelf, might not be kind of cloud-friendly yet. You need an operating system to be replicated to AWS. That's what disaster recovery does for you. Now we've simplified the ease of use so you can see there's quite a complex series of steps required to do failbacks and failovers and what have you. So basically we've just done a ton of work to make that a light touch experience in the DRS console to simplify IaaS failover and failbacks. For those wanting to create a kind of a custom failover plan, maybe you want to have some other business logic going on or some health checks, whatever it may be, there's 3 new APIs available in DRS now as well, so you can build out your own kind of custom plan and call it failover if you need to. CloudWatch Internet Monitor. So AWS, we're already monitoring peering with our internet suppliers and magic providers and what have you. We already actually have quite a lot of telemetry information that helps us engineer traffic for some very high availability for public-facing web services. What we've done is we've merged that data set with customers' context. So you can now see on your public endpoints things that are performance metrics from the internet suppliers and it can be specific to locations and even specific ISPs. So if you're looking at an anomaly in your website and it suddenly dips, then you can get a bit of insight, helps you avoid that whole red herring rabbit holes when it comes to this. These might just be local ISPs, they start BGP or something like that. So nice little operational tool. Okay, multi-region access points, or MRAP. This is the part where I'm supposed to put RAP. But it gives you a single global S3 endpoint for many buckets across many regions, so very useful for designing multi-region applications for extreme availability. It can optionally do bidirectional replication if you want that. Depends on your app. It does do it. It's work magic. This new feature gives you a nice granular control. I'm not sure if we can quite see it. I'm going to try the magic button again. You can now set which buckets you want to have a preference for kind of active and in service. So you can have active, passive, and a mix. You can also pair things together, so you might deliberately do traffic shifting between different regions to emulate an outage, for example, or something along the lines of just reducing latency more generally. Very useful control for application design, multi-region. As we all know, consistency, availability, partitioning tolerance, use these controls to make those objectives so your application will behave as expected. Okay, Route 53. If you didn't already know, it's our global DNS service. Has a feature called the Application Recovery Controller, so it's some DNS-based routing and readiness checks. It has a new capability called zonal shift. So what this does, it lets you deliberately prevent web requests coming into load balances from hitting a particular zone which you nominate. You might do this for a number of reasons. Maybe you've got a reliability or performance issue or an app in a particular zone, and you just want to shift the traffic away. So this isn't a permanent kind of DR or zone-based vehicle. It only lasts about 72 hours at max. You can specify how long the shift lasts. So you can keep bumping it up if you like, but you kind of get, it's like a stress-based troubleshooting tool. So if you know that there's a problem in a particular zone, shift away from it. Wait until AWS has resolved the situation if it's us, or maybe a new release that's caused some problems to get that sorted out. Stress-free way. That's it from me. It's now time for the ferociously handsome Byron Hobson.
G'day folks, my name's Byron. I'm an architect, part of our customer-facing security team here at AWS in Australia. When we talk about security on AWS, we always start with the shared responsibility model. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the textbook definition, which is AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, and customers are responsible for security in the cloud. Something important to consider, though, is that AWS is here to help. A lot of what I'm covering here are tools and features that can help you with your security in the cloud. The first of those is Amazon Inspector. If you're not familiar with Amazon Inspector, it's a service that allows you to search for CVEs and known vulnerabilities within your workload. We revamped this massively at reInvent in 2021. It now uses the Systems Manager agent, and works a lot better with ephemeral workloads that spin up and down really quickly. We've now taken this a step further, and we're also able to run AWS Inspector or Amazon Inspector across our Lambda functions. So when we're deploying code into Lambda, we're able to inspect that code that's being deployed and identify where there are known vulnerabilities. We can then plug that into the same dashboard that exists for other parts of our workload and get a unified view across all of the bits of our workload, no matter where they're running. This is one of those blinking you'll miss it sort of moments. I saw this slide appear in the pack and I was like, where was this announced? This was mentioned during the keynote. So GuardDuty is a service it's like an intrusion detection service. It pulls in data from a number of different sources and lets you know when there are potential security events happening within your organization. Something that was announced as coming soon is GuardDuty Container Runtime Threat Detection. So last year we added the possibility to ingest EKS audit logs into GuardDuty and use those to find potential security events. What we announced at reInvent is we're going to take that a step further and be able to look at behavior from an OS level to be able to determine, to look for those sort of events. The other thing that we added for Amazon GuardDuty is the ability to protect your RDS instances. So RDS allows you to run a managed database. With GuardDuty, if you enable this as an ingestion source, it can look at the logging behavior across those instances and let you know where there are people potentially trying to log into your RDS instances from places they shouldn't be logging in from. A lot of these detections that are under the hood are either heuristic based, where there's something like, we know that this is logged in from a known bad IP, but this one in particular also builds up a machine learning model. So it trains a machine learning model to understand what the normal pattern of use looks like over time for your RDS instance, and then lets you know when it strays from that baseline. AWS configures a service that essentially acts as a change management database for your cloud environment. It can audit and it can let you know what resources exist across a number of different services, and you can then start to set rules around how those resources should be configured. Prior to this announcement, you could either have those controls as detective, so and then running when it detects it based on either a time-based stamp, so we run it periodically, or you can detect it when a resource is created. This moves it into a proactive mode, so rather than just detecting it after the event has occurred, if you're deploying your infrastructure through CloudFormation, you can now set up config rules which essentially use those CloudFormation hooks to detect when you're going to get to a bad state, when you're going to get to a state that's not intended, and prevent that from happening in the first place. We recommend all customers use multiple AWS accounts across their environment, and one of the fastest ways to get started with that is using AWS Control Tower, which sets up the best practice multi-account setup for your organization. This is basically a fancy way of saying we've added a lot more controls to it. When you set up a Control Tower, you can create guardrails, which are either preventative to prevent things from happening, or detective that detect when it's strayed from that. These comprehensive controls, we've added a whole bunch more controls, and what we've also done now is we've started to group those into particular frameworks. So if you're an organization that needs to be PCI DSS compliant, you can select a pack of controls against your Control Tower that will help you meet those requirements. Amazon Macie is a service that allows you to discover potential PII within your environment. Previously, the way that you'd set that up is you'd pick the buckets that you want to look for that data in, and then set up a schedule to scan those buckets. Amazon Macie now integrates with organizations. So where you're running a multi-account organization, where you've got lots of different buckets, you can now enable Macie at an organization-wide view to get a single view across the data across your organization and view that across all of your assets rather than on a bucket-by-bucket basis. We've also introduced a new type of ways to use keys with KMS. So KMS integrates with a bunch of different AWS services. And essentially the primer to KNS is symmetric encryption is good because it's easy and fast. But we want to make sure that we're protecting those keys because that same key is used to encrypt and decrypt our data. What KNS allows us to do is it allows us to generate a unique symmetric data key for each piece of data that we want to store, whether it's in something like S3 or an EDS volume or a RDS storage or RDS storage, and then we can store that in KNS, and the master key, which is an asymmetric key, is stored by some sort of backing store. And then when we're using services like S3, it's going to call to KNS to get that data key. It's going to store the encrypted data key with your encrypted data in an envelope and then throw the unencrypted key away. It's only ever in memory. So what's important though is we want to look at, well, so because that key that's used to encrypt that data key is super important, we want to look at how we store that. So previously we could store it in KNS itself, where we manage that for you. You could store it as in a cloud HSM if you set up your own cloud HSM for that environment. And now what we've also added is the ability to have an external key manager. So if you want to run your own cloud HSM on-premise and control not just the logical access around who has access to that, but the physical access as well, you've now got much more control over that. Essentially what that looks like under the hood is the AWS services use a KNS key, will talk to KNS, and that KNS key is then routed to a proxy. So you select an external key store when you're selecting what type of key you want to use. The KNS APIs aren't changing, they're exactly the same. But now KNS will talk to a VPC endpoint and a network load balancer where you set up your own proxies. So you need to set up proxies that then forward it onto your on-premises environment. Something that I think is really important with this from a Perth perspective is you need really low latency between where your proxies live in AWS and where your external physical HSM is. This is really cool. It means that the AWS APIs are all staying exactly the same. It already integrates with all of the services that it already integrates with, but now you've got additional control over how those keys are stored and used. My recommendation is if you're going down this path, maybe come talk to me first, because there's a lot of things that you're now responsible for. When I speak about that shared responsibility model, that line shifts, and there's now a lot more things that are in your control that you're responsible for. So when you're setting this up, you need to think about the high availability, the backup, the failover, all that good stuff to make sure that it remains highly available. But you're in full control of that key. Amazon Verified Permissions. This is, I like this service. I think this is going to be really interesting. It also ties into one of the networking services that we'll be talking about later. Something that a lot of customers are starting to explore is the idea of zero trust. Essentially what zero trust is it's a pattern of moving from a world where we trust the network boundaries for our security. If you're in our organization, then you must be allowed to be in here and therefore you're secure, to starting to not trust anything and authorizing at every single point that we can. One of the patterns that are used in there is having an external policy decision point. In other words, where we administrate our policies and where we decide to evaluate those policies is external from the system that needs the result of that. And verified permissions is one of the first steps to allow us to do that. So we are able to define our policies in a language called CEDAR, which is allows us to basically say, we can pass in things like, this is the action that a user wants to take, this is the principle. Maybe some additional data like, here's the location of that user. We can write a policy in CEDAR to say, well, this user is allowed to access these kind of resources as long as they're logging in from the USA. From our application point of view, all we need to do is we need to go, okay, well, this is the resource, this is the principle, here's that additional information. We pass it out as an API call. Verified permissions is where that policy is managed. Verified permissions is where that decision point is made, and that's then passed back as allowed or denied to the application. So the only thing you need to really be implementing in the application is the right behavior if it's allowed or denied. The management of those policies, the management of those decision points now lives in Amazon Verified Permissions. No matter what any of the presenters say after me, this is the coolest service that we released every year. A best practice within security is always to take all of our logs, to put them in a centralized place where we can store and analyze them. If we should have a security incident, we want to be able to quickly go and get those logs, understand what's happening within our environment so we can respond to it. And something that a lot of teams struggle with is how do we set this up? There's a bunch of AWS tools out there already to build a data lake about how we process that. And Security Lake builds on top of that to build a purpose-built security data lake for us to be able to explore that data in. It takes in data from over 50 integrated sources. So those are things like our CloudTrail logs, which is our order log of who did what. It can take in things like our guard duty findings. It can take in things like IAM Access Analyzer, which is telling us where we've potentially misconfigured IAM roles, and stores that centrally for us to analyze. It normalizes them, so that way, and it stores it in S3, so by normalizing it and storing it in S3, we can handle all of the permissions about how should this data be petitioned for storage and retrieval. How should we be able to put this data in a standard format such that we can query across sets of data. When something happens, we might notice a malicious IP and we want to know all of the guard duty findings. We want to know all of the activity that that person did in CloudTrail. We might have something external that we want to be able to look at and correlate across that as well. By normalizing that data, we can compare those different data sources. The other thing about having it stored in our S3 buckets is we can now start to put in things like lifecycle policies, move it through different tiers of storage to reduce our storage costs. And we can choose any analytical tool, right? If we're using Athena, we can just plug that straight in and start querying it. Or maybe we've got an Elasticsearch cluster, we can start to build a pipeline to move through into that to be able to start searching through it. The other thing that comes with this is, although there's over 50 things piped in already, we've also released this open cybersecurity schema framework. So if you're already using tools, a lot of tools already have, a lot of our partners already implement this as well. You can pull in any data you want into this security lake to be able to compare it with those other pieces of data across your environment. So remember, this is the coolest service no matter what anyone else says. To talk to us about some of the not as cool services, Curtis Kane's going to talk to us about serverless.
Alright, afternoon all. So I'm a technical account manager here at AWS. My name is Curtis Kane, as Byron mentioned, and I get to speak amongst the wonderful essays today, so they let their first hand in. They only gave me 3 slides, so read into that however you want. The very first one is around Lambda, so Lambda Snap Start. So when we think about Lambda, there's obviously 3 discrete phases. You've got your init phase, your initialization, you've got your invocation, and then you've got your shutdown. Now, what we wanted to do was improve that init phase, because for most use cases, it happens in milliseconds. You bootstrap your runtime, you load your static code and run that, and it's very quick. Where it doesn't is in the use case of Java and other use cases. But for example, Java, when you're loading the framework, it can take up to 10 seconds. So what we wanted to do with this, with Lambda Snap Start, is find a way to reduce that. So what you can do, namely Snap Start, is super simple. It's a tick in the box, as simple as that. And what it does, it actually takes an immutable encrypted snapshot of that model, of the memory and the disk stack of that Lambda init phase. And then you can use that in subsequent invocations, simply drawing from that cache. So it doesn't have to go a cold start, it's not a fresh build each single time, it just draws from that. So it changes that init phase for those large ones with frameworks and a lot of static code significantly down. It makes it a lot quicker, a lot more cost optimized, a lot more benefits. It is GA, it is available in Sydney, it's not available in Melbourne just yet, and it comes at no cost, which is a really cool thing because it can save you money at no extra cost. The other thing to be aware though, there are some nuances with it. Obviously if you're doing some, anything that's random, like random seeds in your init phase, you want to move that to the invocation, because the invocation map is not going to be as random each time we pull down from that cache. That's a little bit on Lambda. I'm going to skip that slide because I told you there's only 3 and I'm like, there's actually 4, but move on. Next up is event-driven pipes. So it's more and more common these days that you see a bundle of services to create modern event-driven architectures. And obviously Event Bridge has been around for a while, and this extends that beyond just the buses and the bridge scheduler. Event bridge pipes are exactly what they say on the tin. It's a pipe between a source and a destination. And it removes that need to write your glue code, which is often what we see. The glue code can really introduce risk of bugs based on the code. It slows your development velocity, a myriad of other things. What Event Bridge Pipes does is simplify that to create that point-to-point integration between your event source and your event destination. The beauty of it as well is the filtering and enrichment piece. So filtering is exactly what it says on the tin. You just filter the event that you've got before you pass it on to your destination. You get a subset of that however you want to modify. With enrichment, and this is really cool, you could pass to a Lambda function to take that data and manipulate it, transpose it, append further information to it, whatever it might be, before you pass it on to your destination. So it's a really, really cool feature, and it's going to be a big part to play, I think, with serverless work models that we move forward. As for pricing, it's about 40 cents per million requests, so you do get a lot of value for money. Again, GA is available in Sydney, not available in Melbourne. And the last one from me is step functions, distributed maps. So step functions, if you're not aware, it's our visual workflow service. We use it heavily for orchestrating microservices or automating processes, all those sort of activities. And it has a map state within it. Now that map state essentially iterates over a data set, so it performs the identical operation over a data set. Up until now, or up until reinvent that one, a few months delayed, it used to be that the inline map state would only support 40 parallel iterations. We've lifted that by a healthy 9,960 up to 10,000 executions. So it makes a big difference on what you can do. And another key differentiator for it is previously that map state could only take a JSON array as an input. Now you can take JSON arrays, you can take S3 buckets, you can take CSV files, and you can really start to scale those data sets and those workloads without having really complex workloads that you need to build. So really, really excited for this and what it's going to look like. As a general rule of thumb, if you use this compared to inline map, it's either going to be the same cost or cheaper. But usually you get more value from using this than anything else. Done. Over to Alex. That's serverless. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to talk very quickly about containers. I do have a compute section coming up shortly. I'm Alex Haggett. I'm one of the solutions architects here in the Perth office. So what is Amazon ECS Service Connect? It is a way to connect services that are running on ECS. Funnily enough. So what does that actually mean? It is the easy button if you're all in on ECS for being able to connect and discover services deployed across potentially multiple ECS clusters and potentially multiple VPC and AWS accounts. So it's a new option that you can choose when you configure a new cluster running on either Fargate or EC2. You can then define an enabled service connect, and it will create a namespace within CloudMap, or you can import an existing one, and then allows services to kind of find and talk to each other without having to manage load balancers and worry about networking between those services, and having the overhead of unit costs with that. So it's a really neat feature. I believe someone will also talk about VPC ladders, which if you've got EC2 in the mix, EKS, Kubernetes and other stuff like that provides probably a slightly different service, but this is the easy mode. There we go, I'm done with containers. So now I'm going to talk about what is probably, well, it's not a new service, it's EC2. It's definitely my favourite service. I love it to bits. Byron's going to claim that Security Lake was the most fascinating service that was launched, or the best service. Funnily enough, that runs on EC2, so I'm going to claim a little bit of that as well. For my my time here at AWS, the coolest thing I've ever done is help a customer launch 60,000 instances in under 10 minutes for 1.1 million vCPUs right here in an office in Perth. not running here in Perth, out of the East region, but just that scale is mind-blowing, and it took their workloads down from 10 days to 2 hours to execute, so it was pretty cool. Nitro. So Nitro is not new to AWS. It's the reason we got into, for those not familiar, it's the reason we got into building our own silicon. It is essentially custom silicon that sits aside the compute that you run with EC2 and handles stuff like networking and security, connections, disks, and everything like that, and takes all of that away from the hypervisor. Which means that you get more of the compute resources, essentially all of the compute resources that we offer in EC2 instances. So it's been a long journey, and we have just launched our latest generation of the Nitro card, version 5. It's got double the amount of transistors, 2 times more bandwidth. Importantly as well, particularly for some of the instances I'll be talking about, it decreases the latency and you get higher packets per second through. So one of the first instances that is just in preview at the moment is the C7GN instance. It's based on our Graviton 3 instances, but it's a slightly modified one called the Graviton 3E. That's our 3rd generation of our own custom ARM silicon, and it offers amazing price performance and low power for that. So you can, to go with the Nitro V5 increased networking throughput, you can get up to 200 gigabits per second of networking bandwidth. And use cases are things like network virtual appliances, data analytics, and CPU-based artificial intelligence and machine learning. If you want to sign up to the preview, you can just go to our landing page, put in your details, request a specific instance size and region that you're interested in. In terms of how easy it is to do that, I've had a customer that's already gone in to do that. They're testing these C7GNs right now for their specific workloads. Further to that, we also announced an HD 7G. So this is also built on the Graviton 3E chip. Specifically, Graviton 3E also includes additional, performance based around floating point operations and vector operations. So a lot of HPC and our applications can rely heavily on that, and so we've kind of tweaked it, used some benefit from the Nitro 5 cards, and we're getting better performance on that. So on these graphs here, we've got HDL, which is a computational benchmark for linear algebra, operating 35% higher. GROMACS, which is molecular modeling, and 12% better, and then in some financial options pricing, 30% better performance over what was already amazing with our Graviton 3 instances. And just stay tuned, we'll be announcing the availability of those in early this year. We've also got the HPC 6ID instances. They're optimized to run memory, bandwidth-bound, data-intensive HPC workloads. There's only one instance size. That's something to be aware of. The point is that you cluster lots of them together, and they have super fast networking that they can connect between. Hyperthreading is disabled, so you can get higher higher per vCPU throughput. And also higher per vCPU memory bandwidth. They're available, and you can cluster them together in a single availability zone. They're built on isolate cores, and they're currently available in US East Ohio. And now for the, just very quickly as well, I wanted to call out as well, we've also launched the R7IZ instance. So that's an Intel-based instance. It uses our 4th generation scalable Intel chip, which Sapphire, codenamed Sapphire Rapids. That is basically the highest performance per vCPU of our Intel chips, and it's great for people that are looking at stuff like electronic design automation, EDA. There's also people in particular that are running licensed, servers and stuff like that, or databases. It can help reduce per vCPU licensing costs. So that's important for some workloads. And lastly, we have the Inf2 or Inference second generation of our Inference processor. So this is used for demanding deep learning inference applications. It's specifically designed silicon for that, and this is our third AWS designed deep learning accelerator. So it increases, the compute performance, the memory, and higher throughput. But importantly as well, to support things like doing, inference, support ultra large, 100 billion plus parameter models that can also scale out over multiple distributed inference nodes with ultra high speed connectivity between them. So that goes with the AWS Neuron SDK, which is natively integrated with popular ML frameworks like PySpark, PyTorch, and TensorFlow, and so you can deploy your deep learning applications onto the Inf2 instances with just a few lines of code. Awesome. So I'm done. I'm going to hand over to international Twitch star Derek, and we'll talk about builder experience.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sure we all agree that was fascinating, and we all love a good instance. I hope everybody's also enjoying the delicious pizza and drinks tonight. My name's Derek. I'm a developer advocate at AWS. I'm going to talk to you about builder experience. So, builder experience, you may be familiar as developer experience, but we are being more inclusive as we now know that not all developers or builders, or all builders may not be developers. So the first thing I want to talk about, a reInvent that was released a bit under the radar, and we don't even have a slide for it, is the concept of a builder ID. So what we've released is a way of you to sign up for different services using this builder ID. And this builder ID will then be your ID as you go through your journey on AWS. So two of the services I'm going to talk to you about today use the builder ID, but if you think down the track in the future, it's a better way of communicating with customers. In AWS, we usually use the AWS account ID, whereas the builder ID is more geared towards builders, developers, as a nice way of interacting with each other, finding out solutions, answers, and stuff like that. So that's the builder ID, something to keep an eye on. So the first service I'm actually going to talk about is called Code Catalyst. So this Code Catalyst was actually one of the big announcements at reInvent this year. Werner's keynote was very much filled with Code Catalyst. So what is Code Catalyst? Has anybody used it? It's been out for a couple of weeks. Nobody's used it. So if you think about Code Catalyst, it is your single pane of glass for a project that you want to build in AWS. So you can track issues, you can have your code repository there, you can build a dev environment, you can have your pipelines. And a lot of you who have probably used AWS in the past and probably are thinking, well, what about code pipeline? What about all the other tools that I can use to do the exact same tasks? And there are lots out there. There's you've got Jira for issue management, you've got Bitbucket for code. So what Code Catalyst is trying to reduce the friction points of leaving the AWS environment to get all that information. So Code Catalyst, all that information that you need to build and deploy an application is all inside Code Catalyst. So that's the only place you want to go. The coolest feature of Code Catalyst when you start to use it is actually the development environments. So the development environments, you can spin up a development environment and then you can use tools like VS Code to SSH into that development environment, and you can control the code from Visual Studio Code, from Cloud9, and from JetBrains as well. So it's a really nice tool to have a go. Next one is a very relevant tool to the conversations that I've been having at least over the last 2 weeks in AI. So ChatGPT is very much front of mind at the minute. Code Whisperer is how developers and builders can use AI to create code. This has been in preview since November. Has anybody used it? Again, this is a tool to make builders and developers more efficient. It's not going to take over our jobs. It's just going to make our jobs quicker so we can concentrate on the high value things rather than Googling or going to Stack Overflow to work out how to upload a file in S3. So the way that you use Code Whisperer, again, all you do is sign up with your builder ID. Is you put a comment in what you want to do, so upload file to S3. You hit Command C, and it gives you the first line. So it's what it thinks the code should be. You can tab to accept it, or up and down arrow to give you another suggestion. And you can build out your code using that. Now there's a number of other products in the market that do this as well. The big differentiator from Code Whisperer is you can actually set a setting in Code Whisperer where you give the person who originally wrote the code that you're using some kudos. So we're actually acknowledging the open source developers who wrote the code that you're pulling in using this tool. So Code Whisperer, available at all the IDEs there. I'm not going to read them all out because you can read, and that is really worth checking out. And then finally, the last service is Application Composer. So when you think about Application Composer, you have to think about why. So the pain, what is Application Composer trying to fix for you? So Application Composer is all about when you start a project and you have to think about, oh, I have to build an API. So behind that API, I need some lambdas, and then that lambda is going to communicate to DynamoDB. How am I going to build the infrastructure as code template that actually describes that? That's a lot of YAML, right? So Application Composer is a way that you can visually compose YAML, SAM templates. So rather than, I hate writing YAML, by the way, too many tabs, horrible thing. So Application Composer looks like this. So you can drag and drop parts of the application that you need, API Gateway, DynamoDB, Lambda, and others, drag them into the palette, and then change the properties of the particular components, and that will then sync to your local drive. So you can set it up to go, my SAM template lives here, Application Composer can then sync, and that's bi-directional sync. So you can start the template, sync to the C drive, change some of the parameters, it will then sync back to the UI here, and you can start building out your project that way. It's very much aimed at people starting out. So if you don't know anything about SAM, or you've never used AWS infrastructure as code before, this is a great place to start. It's visual and it's easy to use. And there are the particular use cases that I've described. So really, it's getting started. Don't know infrastructure as code, want to learn SAM, Application Composer. That is it. Thank you.
So, analytics. My name is Rachel Renil. I'm another solutions architect here based in Perth. First of all, partially agree with Byron about that security lake. But please remember, it is a lake. So everything I want to discuss in the next 10 minutes around analytics will hugely improve the user experience when you interact with the security layer. So first stop, Amazon data zone. If you look at the description, you will get enhanced data discovery, simplified collaboration, govern the data. We already have the group, we already have the data formation to centralize managing government data. But remember, data zone is designed for business user. Imagine you have a large organization and you want to implement, for example, data mesh or lakehouse.
you have different teams all wanting to be the owner of the data. And then a lot of the owners might be business users in your organization. Can you imagine you provision AWS console access for those business users? That's hard, right? Can you imagine your business user trying to understand how I serialize the data in JSON, in Parquet, how I use data formation to define my access level? So that's hard. That's exactly the gap timezone fits in. It has the user portal built in. So you, instead of hosting a commercial data catalog solution, you can use timezone. And you can integrate with your existing IDP, for example, your ID or Okta, and then allow your business user to log into the data zone, explore what kind of business data you have, and to define who you want to share the data with. So that's the target of data zone use case. Second step, through data quality. So when you have a lot of data, you want to control the quality. Data engineers used to use open source framework and write hard code, a lot of the rules to make sure my raw data being quality controlled and moved to the imperative layer. Blue data quality simplifies this process. It allows you to define where your data is, and then it will do profiling to the data and generate some of the, using wizard generate some of the rules. Looking at those rules, then you can define what kind of rules you want to apply to the future data. And then you can run these rules against your data at rest and in action. For example, you can apply those rules to data already sitting at 3, or you can chuck in that step into your ETL pipeline. Give you an example of what the rules look like. So it has the data quality definition language, which you can generate this kind of high-level, very abstract language to define what your data should look like. And then you can version control it, modify it, and then apply it to your existing data. Next stop, Amazon AppFlow. For people not familiar with Amazon AppFlow, this is the service we designed for customers to gain insight across all your data that being spread into multiple SaaS applications. For large organizations, you might have a SaaS first approach strategy. Then you will have data spread into multiple different applications. You want to consolidate data, and then you want to know how I extract the data from all these different SaaS applications. So AppFlow provides officially supported connectors or called adapters, and you can use low code or no code to extract the data and integrate with AWS cloud native services. And we are now supporting more and more different data sources. And next is the support for Spark. Nowadays, more and more data engineers are using Spark instead of SQL. And you must be familiar with our Athena, which is a fully managed serverless engine to allow you to use SQL to explore your data stored in your lake. And now, with developers who are familiar with Spark, you can continue to use Athena, but you can open a workspace, a workshop, and start to write Spark code to explore your data. That's from a compute perspective. On the other hand, if your data is already stored in data warehouse, for example, Redshift, and then normally we explore our Redshift data using SQL, but for engineers who already use Glue and EMR, we are familiar with Spark. So now we provide official adapter for Redshift to allow you to write Spark code to manipulate the data that you store in the Redshift. Redshift have a lot of new features released. The first one is Redshift streaming injection. So normally with data warehouse, we deal with batch Redshift streaming injection. Normally, when you want to inject streaming data, you need Kinesis Kafka then, wire with Kinesis Firehouse, and then cache and flush the data into your Redshift. That's the common pipeline. And now we simplify this pipeline. We do not need Kinesis Firehouse anymore. You can directly pipe your data from Kinesis or managed Kafka into Redshift. Then you can do near real-time analytics using Redshift. So this is a feature customer has been asking for a long time. Amazon Redshift multi-AZ. Now with this officially being supported by Redshift, you will get a single endpoint exactly the same way you use RDS multi-AZ. And then when a single AZ is not available, the end user will be impacted. And next feature is called Redshift Dynamic Data Masking. When you store a lot of data in Redshift, you might contain some PI data, which is sensitive. A common practice is to masking the data. Either you do static masking, which means you need to transform the data, or you can do dynamic data masking. In this case, you define the policies about what user have what access to what data. And then, if there is sensitive data, you shouldn't be viewed by the user or role. It will be dynamically masked before the data returns to the user. So it's very flexible. So in this diagram, we showed an example saying that we can define roles, we can define conditions. So it's not like, okay, masking the whole column. We can say, okay, for the phone number, only for users based in WA, we can view the phone number. For all the other locations, the phone number as a PII will be masked. So you can define very dynamic roles based on other columns. And next feature is Redshift auto copy from S3. So Redshift have the copy command where you can copy the data from S3, like CSV or Puppet. A lot of customers trying to automate this pipeline, where you need to send a notification, maybe use a Lambda to trigger the copy. Now, we simplify that to make that a feature so that instead of you drafting that logic when and where to trigger the logic and keep track of which file I have already loaded and which file I haven't treated. Instead, you just specify here's my source. And then, by configuration, the service feature will keep track of which data you have loaded as well. So, you can simplify that pipeline. And the next feature is around federation with Aurora. So, we already support federated query between Aurora, which is a transactional database, and Redshift. So this zero ETL integration is more around advanced feature provided by Redshift. Because now with Redshift, you can apply some machine learning algorithm with the data. Instead of having to move the data from Aurora to Redshift to use this advanced feature, now you can directly use Redshift and apply the data, even the data sits in the Aurora database. Late formation data sharing access control. This is more a feature for Redshift. So we already have the late formation centrally managing how you access the data. We already have the feature to define, to federate multiple Redshift data sources, clusters. Now you can use late formation to centrally define who can have what access to which Redshift cluster. Last but not least, I will quickly go through a few updates with QuickSight, which is our fully managed BI tool. First feature is called QuickSight Originating Reports. This is a common use case with large organizations where you want to generate reports like quarterly, monthly, annually, and you want the report in certain format with PDF to send out to all the recipients. And now the QuickSight QuickSight native reports allows you to define those kind of reports, and with like multiple pages, whatever you want to define, and send to all the relevant people. QuickSight Q is a feature we announced previously, and with QuickSight Q, business users can ask questions, and QuickSight generates the dashboard using natural language. But there are some preparation work you have to do. For example, your column might code location, but then the business user might ask what country generates most of the sales. And then, if you want to use the QuickSight Q, you might want to define some text to have some user-friendly names for your columns to make this natural language work. Now, that part of work being handed over to AI. So nowadays, as a developer, we have less and less work to do. And the AI-powered QuickSight will do some of the tagging for you, for the column. Even you have an underscore or a short name for that column, it will generate the tag for you so that the business user can directly ask natural language questions to generate the dashboard. And like the business user, they do not like click ops, so we want to use the natural language. On the other hand, developers also do not like click ops. They want to use code to define everything. That's the reason we released more API for QuickSight. So now, what does it mean is using the QuickSight API, you can use inference code to define your dashboard. And it also paved the way if you want to do large-scale migration from some legacy BI tools, for example, hosted on the server, because now it's API enabled. So you can evolve to transform existing dashboard to fully managed serverless QuickSight. So that is my update in the analytics. I will hand over to James.
Thank you. So I'm James, yet another solution architect, just for a change. So I'm going to go through SageMaker, which we all know is the best service. We've only got 5 more sections, so just give me a little bit longer. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was a bit of a redesign. So SageMaker Studios actually had a bit of an overhaul. Anybody using SageMaker? Anybody want to use it? See if I can get you excited. So we've redesigned this to fit with the AI development. So before it was kind of a little bit clunky to find your way around and figure out what you wanted to do. So we've kind of modeled the new UI. So it's working through that process. So you know exactly where you can start at the top, working your way through. It's all about making the experience better for data scientists and analysts and other users that want to use this environment. On to a few new features that we've got in SageMaker Studio, SageMaker Notebook, sorry. So 3 new features here. So built-in data preparation, sharing of notebooks and collaboration with other people, other data scientists, and then automation of notebooks as well, which was a big problem in SageMaker for a while. How do we actually run those notebooks in a virtual way? So just starting with the sharing capability, the data prep capability. So before you can use Data Wrangler within SageMaker, which is a UI-driven way of exploring your data, that's now being integrated directly into the notebooks. So you can now use a data frame, and that data frame can display a nicer visual of the UI for that data frame. So you can start exploring that. It's essentially using pandas under the covers, so it's pandas data frames. It's a good way of just finding errors and exploring data types within data sets. Onto SageMaker sharing. So we've now created a way that you can share notebooks across different data scientists in real time. Users, it doesn't have to be a data scientist. The idea here is to really collaborate within teams. So you can have multiple people working on that same notebook all at the same time. So really driving forward some of those efficiencies. And then finally, this is one I get asked all the time, is how do I schedule a notebook? You can schedule notebooks today, but it's, it's just harder. We've created a new feature which essentially containerizes your notebook. So we'll go away, we'll containerize it for you, you don't have to do any of this. So under the covers you say, I want to schedule my notebook, we get the container, and then we can schedule that for any time, according to what it is that you want. So those are just notebook features. So then moving on to geospatial. So geospatial in SageMaker is certainly a feature that I've been waiting for a long time. So this is more than just displaying maps. So don't think of this as, oh great, I can now visualize some geospatial data. It's more than that. So there's a whole load of built-in algorithms here for you to do run machine learning over these geospatial assets. So you can pull in your geospatial assets, you can use open source assets that are built in, and then you can run some pre-canned ML models. You can also run your own ML models over that as well. And it just give you the ability to get started. Now this is only available at the moment in the US. So if anybody is interested in this feature, please do let me know so that we can register your interest and hopefully we can accelerate that to come into Australia. So I mentioned SageMaker Data Wrangler earlier. So Data Wrangler's also been enhanced. So essentially, and Rachel touched on this I think earlier, there was an app flow enhancement with 50% of SaaS services. Essentially, Data Wrangler has harnessed that same app flow routine to now enable you to go connect to those different SaaS services through SageMaker and through Data Wrangler. So you don't need to go anywhere else. You can just come straight into your SageMaker environment and go connect and acquire all of that information. So I think there's 40 of them that are available in here. So we don't get the full app flow suite just yet, but more will continue to get added. So some other new features to hit SageMaker. So I'll start on the other side just quickly. So within SageMaker you've got the jump starts. So that allows you to just go and quickly spin up a kind of pre-canned notebook, get started really quickly, which is really useful. We've extended that jumpstart capability so that you can actually now start creating your own jumpstarts. So if you want to have a way to allow analysts or data scientists to get started really quickly with a certain type of notebook, you can build a jumpstart and that will allow them to just go and create that nice and easily, all through that same SageMaker UI. On the other side, we've now got what's called shadow mode or shadow testing. So this is a way to allow you to essentially use production data to test your model. So essentially what this is doing is creating a shadow of your environment. It's going to pull certain production transactions off and allow that to go through the shadow testing. So it's not going to affect your production model, but it's giving you extra information about your model so that you can continue to enhance and make your models better over time. So it's just increasing that confidence. We've got some new governance tools as well. So they're not all on the slide, so I'll just talk through them quickly. We've got Role Manager. So that allows you now to administer more fine-grained access into your machine learning or into your SageMaker environment. We've also got SageMaker Model Cards, which creates a single source of truth for model information, so allowing you to create more metadata about your models and give that out to your users. And then there's a model dashboard, which is giving you a unified view to monitor all of your different models that you've got within the SageMaker environment. So just adding to that governance within the AI space, SageMaker section. I've just got a couple of updates around AI and ML services. So jumping into TextCraft, we've now got an analyze lending API. So this is an API that allows mortgage providers to assess applications very quickly without having to do lots of manual work and manual checking of documents. So this will take all their documents in and allow them to get scores out as to whether they provide that way. So a nice, super easy way to start making mortgage applications efficient. Comprehend for IDP. So this is essentially combining some other services. So this is allowing you to extract entities from PDF documents or Word files, image files that you've loaded into the environment, and extract that text immediately through the comprehend environment. So before you would have to use another service or an OCR environment to get that information first, before you run through Amazon comprehend. Now you can just run that straight away. That feature is and then the final service that we've got, a couple of new features on that. So Amazon Kendra, which is an intelligent search service that we have powered by machine learning. So this is allowing organizations to provide more relevant information out to their customers or their workforce. So a couple of extra features that have been added. So you can now intelligently search HTML tables and provide more information back in context about the results, as well as expanding the language support to 7 extra languages on top of English. So we'll go through all. And that's me over, so I will hand over IoT to Maxim.
Hi all, I'm Max Chedishow, also a solutions architect here at AWS based in Perth. So we've covered things like analytics, AI, ML. But what do you actually need to be able to run those analytics and running inference? You need data. And that data can come from a variety of different sources. It can come from the security data lake, it can come from your enterprise, relational databases, enterprise systems, and so on and so forth. But wouldn't it be great if the data came from the outside physical environment? And this is where IoT comes in. So I'm here today to cover key announcements relating to AWS IoT services. So first up, we've got MQTT 5 and AWS IoT Core. What's AWS IoT Core? That's a managed service that lets you create, manage, and scale your IoT device fleets reliably and securely on AWS without you actually having to run and manage your own infrastructure. So it sounds pretty cool, and it's a pretty solid contender for the greatest AWS services you ask me. But it probably runs on EC2 somewhere, so can't beat that. What's the deal with MQTT 5 and why is that important? So MQTT is a popular standard when it comes to IoT data transmission, and it's popular due to its lightweight implementation. MQTT 5 was conceived in 2019 by the Oasis Foundation as the next major upgrade to the previous version of MQTT 3.1.1. It was devised to allow for scalability and large-scale system support. And in that new specification, a number of new features and upgrades were introduced. Unfortunately, previously, AWS IoT Core only supported MQTT version 3.1.1, i.e. the older version. However, now, AWS IoT Core added support for MQTT 5, and that means that you can take advantage of those new enhancements and upgrades to make your IoT workloads on AWS more robust. Just to give you a couple of examples of how that's relevant. For example, you can leverage message headers for more efficient, faster message processing without having to decode the entire message payload. You can also do things like request-response topics. And with request-response topics, you get acknowledgement from the recipient to the sender that they've actually received the message that you sent. And that's quite useful in command and control scenarios, for example, where implementing use cases like closing and opening windows or doors flipping lights on and off, and perhaps even controlling pieces of industrial equipment at a plant. The other interesting thing here is that AWS support for MQTT5 is implemented as an additional broker. So that doesn't affect any of the existing device fleets that are using MQTT version 3.1.1. What this also means is that customers can run heterogeneous fleets that are leveraging multiple versions at the same time, side by side, which can be useful for migrations of running older fleets and newer fleets in parallel. And the last thing here is that AWS IoT Core Device Advisor, which is a tool that you can use to verify that your IoT devices can connect to AWS IoT Core reliably and securely, also adds support for MQTT5 testing as part of its test suite. So that's MQTT5. The other one is device location. So many IoT services require location capabilities. And that's normally realized through GPS. Going down the GPS path is not always viable though. So for a couple of reasons. One could be cost. The other one could be, especially when you're dealing with battery-powered devices, you can't really put GPS on it because of high consumption requirements when it comes to power. So AWS IoT Core device location feature adds a number of different methods for your IoT devices to obtain location information, depending on what connectivity capabilities they have. So these variety of methods that are available now include things like cloud-assisted GNSS, or global satellite navigation system, Wi-Fi scanning, mobile network triangulation, even things like IP-based reverse lookouts. What you can do with device location information, well, you can do a number of things as far as the destinations go. For example, you can push location information to an IoT device shadow, which is basically a way to represent device state reliably, and then deals with things like lossy networks and things like that. You can also send that location information to an entity topic of your choosing to be routed to other AWS services for additional processing or analytics. And finally, you can also send that location information to a service called Amazon Location, which basically is a specialized service that you can leverage to support some location-based use cases such as visualization, geofencing, and location-based research tracking. So that's device location. And last but not least, we've got AWS IoT device management scheduled jobs. So what's the importance of scheduled jobs? You get AWS IoT jobs as part of AWS IoT device management to be able to run jobs across your IoT device fleet. The typical use case for that is that if you want to update firmware across the device fleet, or you need to deploy configuration changes across that fleet. Previously though, there was no way to confine the execution of that job to a predetermined time window. So you couldn't really define the start and end time unless you resorted to workarounds like using cloud workbench and Lambda. With this new feature, when you define an IoT device job, you can basically specify a start and end time for that job, which will basically confine the job execution to a predetermined maintenance window, so you can be certain that the job will run during the period that you want it to run. And that's useful for things like, making sure that those updates happen when those IoT devices are under reduced load. So if you're dealing with a use case like transportation telematics, for example, you know that those vehicles, buses, trucks, whatever you've got, are actually in a depot overnight. That's probably a good use case to run those maintenance and updates during that time. The cool thing about this is that it's fully implemented in the cloud, so it doesn't really affect any of the existing fleets, and you don't need to make any changes to the existing fleets to be able to leverage that feature. That's pretty much me done for IoT, and I'm going to hand over to Brad. Thank you.
All right, last one on the home stretch. Literally, I'm the last presenter. If you don't know me, I'm Brett. Yes, I'm another solutions architect. And yes, we are all based here in Perth. It's amazing how many people still think we don't have an office here, which is pretty weird. Master of Ceremonies, Jen. How much time do I have? Are we over?
Well, no, we're not over. We're about just about on. You've got 23 minutes. That's including question time.
Okay.
You've got 11 minutes from your
Okay, fine. All right, let's do this. Everybody knows that networking is actually the coolest services, right? Because if the network doesn't work, nothing else does, right? So I am the networking nerd. We're going to talk about this. This is AWS Verified Access. When you access your corporate applications, today generally you log into a VPN and you go and you connect and you authenticate, you do stuff. Verified Access And Byron talked about zero trust earlier in the night. This is the network component of zero trust. This is, how do I connect my users to my corporate network without a VPN, but still authenticate them? And also, how do I then write a policy that says if this person is sitting in a cafe and their laptop has been properly scanned, then I will let them access these particular applications. But if the posture assessment is not good, then I won't. So there's a whole bunch of combination of things here. There's partners that do posture assessments on the end devices. There's a policy language that you define. We build and scale an endpoint that you connect to, and then you host all of your corporate applications behind that. It's absolutely cool. It's actually a productized version of something we've had inside Amazon for quite some time now. So this is great. It is in preview. You can get it in Sydney, and if you are into the whole network security thing, it is definitely worthwhile. That's number one. Number two is VPC ladders. Derek and I were debating about who's actually going to get to do this because it's kind of more of a developer thing, but let me give you the lowdown on this. Who here runs a bunch of containers? Yeah? Okay, well, right. When you're in containers, one of the big things developers want to do is they want to connect their various services that run in those containers together, but they don't want to talk to the network guy, right? Because networking is really, really hard. And how do you do that today? You generally load a thing called a sidecar, which is some software that's got to go into every single container in order to let those containers talk. VPC Ladders lets you get rid of those sidecars. It lets you connect your services together, again, with a policy language that says that this service can talk to that service under these particular conditions. It does it without adding any additional software. You can have overlapping IP addresses, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So Lattice is really, really powerful. Again, these are the benefits of it. I'm not going to read this to you. But the idea is that now I can say, I have my applications in containers and they can talk to each other. Better, if I've got applications running on EC2, they can participate in Lattice. If they're running on Kubernetes, they can participate in Lattice. If they're running in Lambda, they can participate in Lattice as well. So it's enormously powerful. If you've got lots of teams building little microservices, and remember we all are about the microservices here at Amazon, that's what we do, you can now let them talk to each other in a very controlled way. But your networking and security teams can still sit in the middle of it and set up policies in order to stop or allow those communications. So it gives you nice separation of duties, and your developers can just get on with doing stuff without having to worry about the network. So Lattice is amazing. Come and talk to Derek or myself about it. Myself if you want to know the networking bits, Derek if you want to know whatever the developers are going to do. So that's fine. Literally those are the networking pieces. I do want to finish up on contact center. So we have a service called Amazon Connect. I'm actually not even going to talk about this particular new release feature. This is just for you to read. I actually want to talk about Connect in general. And lest you think that Connect is this dinky little contact center that we created, we have contact centers out of the world with tens of thousands of agents. It scales. It is a cloud-based contact center where you can create a contact center if you want to play with it and be up and running in 15 minutes. The WA government got 1.3 COVID running in under 3 weeks. I used to put contact centers in. It used to take 3 or 4 months to order the equipment. We work in the cloud now. You can stand up a contact center. You can get it up and running. And it can be for 1 agent, 10 agent, or thousands of agents. So we have a whole bunch of reference customers. I'm not going to bore you with all the details here. But contact center is amazing. If you are in the voice space or you are working with your customers to build out a contact center, it could be a contact center for HR, it could be the IT help desk. You can start one of these and it costs you cents per day. Or you can build really big contact centers, and again, one for COVID, for example, all of the agents were working from home. They never ever went into the office. Right. Funny story, apparently they weren't quite ready, and then the police commissioner went on a press conference and went, yeah, just call 1-3-COVID. And 1-3-COVID people went, what? And the phone started ringing. I lied. I've actually got 2 slides here, which is really, really cool stuff, and I just wanted to share this with you. First of all, we're committed to be water positive by 2030. Turns out data centers use a lot of water, okay? For cooling and all sorts of other stuff as well. We're committed globally to being water positive, and this goes in with all our other sustainability promises that we're making as well. So this we announced reInvent, again it's through everyone's notice, but I thought that this was really, really key. We're actually doing things to be sustainable. We're doing things around power as well, we're doing things around heat. This is just another part of that. So I think this is awesome. It shows our commitment to being sustainable even while we are gobbling up all the world's compute storage. And finally, this is the nerd stuff really. Lambda is actually the coolest service. Where's Wesley? Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's fine, right? I have been here at Amazon for about 7.5 years, and the numbers still blow my mind, and I want you to look at the number on the right there. Okay, 10 trillion requests per month into Lambda. Odds are that's That's pretty much it. That's done for me. Now, please, we can have questions now, but that is our survey form. We are really, really big on feedback here at AWS. Please fill in the feedback form and send it to us and tell us how you felt. Big thanks to Christian for organising. Thank you, sir. That's very good. And there's a Jen, Master of Ceremonies over here. So thank you, Jen. Really appreciate the effort. That was absolutely brilliant. Cool. We can do questions here, or we can just go out there and you can just hassle us individually. What are we going to do? Questions on you? You want a drink? Inside voice. Any obvious questions anybody wants to ask?
Does Lattice work with RDS?
No, but why would you want it to?
Some services want to talk about it.
Email me or something about that, and I'll chuck it in as a product feature request. I actually think that's interesting. Okay, that's cool. Oh, awesome! Thank you. That's the So, the Perth local zone launched 2 weeks ago. Okay, so we can now officially tell you that you have resources here in Western Australia to use. I am going to be very cautious because I am a solutions architect. The local zone is not for everyone. It has limited services available in it. It's basically EC2 and EBS. But if you have applications that need super low latency from here, your users in Perth, to AWS resources, then use the local zone. Okay. But you do not get all of the services available there. Do not think that you're going to go, yeah, I'm going to pick up all 2,500 workloads in my data center and move them into the local zone. Yes, you could. It's actually more expensive, and you don't get all the other benefits of running in the region. It is literally in a single data center. There is no data center redundancy. Yes, can you have multiple instances running at the same time? Absolutely. But it's a local zone. It's designed to give you specific application support here, and all those other amazing features that everyone's been talking about, they still live back in the Sydney region. I can't tell you whether people are using it or not, because, but that said, we did have a bunch of launch customers, so people like Woodside and Kirk and all that sort of stuff are all very happy that it's here and all going to use it, but I can't tell you actually use it. There was actually a press release about that, and Sarah actually got to go on various places and do the press tour. So yeah, so it's pretty cool, but we're really, really happy that it's here. It adds to a bunch of stuff. For those that don't know, we've had a Route 53 and CloudFront POP in the city for about 5 years. We've had a Direct Connect POP here for about 4 years, and now of course we have a local zone as well. So thank you to those customers that provided us with feedback that enabled us to convince ours to put it in here as well. If only we could be like Auckland, right? They get a local zone and a region. I don't know why. Everybody's tired of sitting down. Oh, yeah.
If we had all the questions, I would love to call Christian up to the front, please, just to talk about his group and.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
That's okay.
All right. Thank you. So for those that don't know me, Christian. There was a few hiccups this month, as the comms may have attested to, and if it wasn't for Jen and the other organisers, we wouldn't have made it here. Thank you, Sarah, and the rest of the team for having us. So yeah, please, round of applause for the organisers.
thank you very much, speakers. I'm astounded what you managed to cover without speaking it 8 times. Like, we could still pick up a few syllables here and there. User group, coming few sessions. Really great to see some new faces. I hope that we see you at some of the events this year. We'll be broadening our vision a little bit this year, so we're actually hoping to add some hands-on workshops to the schedule for sort of standard monthly meet-up meetings. So stay tuned for that. February session is in the works. It's an IoT theme. Greg Green is a lock-in. We're just working on, before we send out the comms, we're just working on some other presenters for that. We should, in March, have something very interesting in the custom silicon using field programmable gate arrays space. I won't quite drop the presenter in a hole yet because it's not 100% locked in, but yeah, watch that space. And of course, whether or not you've been to one of our sessions before, it's a community group, and we're here to try and facilitate giving you the content that you're interested in. You are more than welcome to get in contact through any of the channels with any of our people and make some suggestions or contribute. So yeah, please get in touch. Jen, do you think that?
Just we are looking at a lightning talk session. We're
Correct.
interested in people being like the supporting lightning talk before a big talk if you're interested, and otherwise you can have a lightning talk session. So if that's something you want to have a think about, maybe have a chat with us and any ideas passed up, we want to encourage people to have a go at them and speaking. We need to spend really more time and spend something. That's really encouraging to see people getting up and joining in. So that's something
That's great. Any questions about user group in general? No? Thank you very much for coming. Thanks again, AWS. Beers and pizza.